I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Amen. It's the word of the Lord. Choose life. Choose life. I know I'm a little weird, so some of these things, when I hear a passage like this, it reminds me of something that happened in my life. So I just want to share that with you a little bit this morning. Story time. So get your popcorn ready and get ready. This story involves a giant super soaker. It involves some bored college students, and it also involves me in handcuffs. So yes. So this was I graduated from college, right? So this is about 2008, August of 2008. This is right before I ended up moving out here to California for the first time. And I was going to go to Fuller Seminary. I had everything ready to go, except Fuller started in September, and my old college, they actually started classes in August. And so I had about a month of extra summertime. And so I'm just working, but also trying to enjoy my last, several weeks in Philadelphia area and my friends. So I actually went to go visit my college where I graduated from. And I went to hang out with some of my old college buddies. And so, when you're that age, you're not really thinking so much about consequences to actions and things like that. Young 22, 23-year-old, college graduate. And so we're there, we're in the dorm, hanging out, and it just became the thing, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? And this is at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning perhaps, and just a word of advice, to any of the, young whippersnappers in here. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m., right? I tell that to Valerie all the time. Nothing good happens after 2 a.m. Go home, if anything. Right? So there we are, around 2 a.m. And so, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? And so we went in that circle, and finally I was like, hey, I have a giant super soaker in my trunk. And then they're like, yeah, that sounds awesome. Now, bear in mind, this super soaker was not just any super soaker. I don't even remember where I got it from. Somebody gave it to me. But this thing was powerful. This was fire hose, powerful super soaker where you just wanted to be say hello to my little friend. And then just wipe out everybody in front of you with water, right? So this was a legit super soaker, right? And so we're all working together, connecting the dots of what we're gonna do. So I got the super soaker, then my friend Dave is like, how about we get somebody with it? And then my friend Andrew is sitting there, well, there's the nature trail. The nature trail. You have no idea how excited we got when we put all of those things together. Let me explain what the nature trail is. So in my college, right, it's in rural Pennsylvania outside of Philadelphia, lots of forests and trees and, everything. There's not much light anywhere. But there's this park that's right behind my college. And this is a Christian college with lots of rules, right? And you give kids, especially kids trying to figure life out, a bunch of rules, they might not know how to handle it, they might end up bored like we were, right? And so so in the nature trail, right, that was the place that young students, especially young couples, would discover some things. They would discover maybe some birds and maybe some bees, if you know what I mean. So, we thought, as maybe our duty as young followers of Christ, we wanted to prevent any, help these people with maybe by preventing some life-altering decisions in the nature trail. And so we ended up going with the giant super soaker in the pitch black of night hunting. There we are, we're looking around. And so we end up coming across, so there's the nature trail over here, and then there's this giant football field that we came across. And in the distance, we see a little hill, and there's nothing but the moonlight. We see a little playground on the other side of this football field. And we can make out just little figures. There's maybe a guy, maybe a girl on the swings just kind of talking to each other. All right, well, we can't find anybody else. So, here's our first victims, right? And so Dave and Andrew, two of my buddies, they take the Super Soaker, and Dave, I don't know why he had this, maybe to hide his identity. He had this like Halloween costume gorilla mask that kind of glowed in the dark, and so he put that on, and so they started to approach the couple, right, for their attack. And so, me, I'm too old for this, right? And so me and my other buddy, Glenn, we stay back. We're on the other side of the football field while Dave and Andrew were running. And, we're just talking, trying to catch up. I haven't seen him all summer. So I'm like, hey man, how you been? How's everything? And he's like, oh, I'm good. Yeah, I'm thinking of starting a business once I graduate. I'm like, oh, that's great. How's your girlfriend? Oh, yeah, we broke up. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. And then all of a sudden we're having this catch-up conversation. You hear something happen over there, and you hear this laughter of Andrew and Dave running across the football field. And it's pitch black, so the reason that I knew that they were running across the football field is you see his little gorilla mask, kind of going, glowing in the dark. And so, oh my gosh, what happened? So I started to run after them, and then all of a sudden, you hear it, and you see it. There's this, on the hill, right, only in the moonlight, you see this giant 6'5", 300-pound man silhouette saying to us, "Do you value your lives?" And then I'm like, Glenn and I look at each other, and Glenn is like, I'm out of here. So he takes up his cell phone and walks away like nothing happened. And this is a big mistake on my part, is I ran after Dave and Andrew to find out what happened, right? Do you value your lives? Good question. Do you value your lives? In connection with this passage, I was going to get back to the passage, but in connection with this passage, I wonder how often, when we read a passage like this, and especially a lot of Old Testament passages, do we view God kind of like this 6'5", 300-pound man silhouette in the night yelling at us, "Do you value your lives?" as sort of a threatening kind of voice? Is that how we view God? Or does a passage like this, is it trying to convey something else? Something different, something maybe more effective to really allow us to really value our lives. A little bit of context here. Moses, at this time in the history of the people of Israel, they're traveling through the wilderness. They're trying to get to the promised land. They haven't been ready for all this time. And finally, this next young generation is getting ready. They're on the brink of entering into the land that God promised them. And so Moses, before he dies, is giving them one last speech, right? This is his farewell speech, his advice to the next generation. And he's telling them, choose life. You have a choice between life and death. Choose life. Choose the way that God laid out for you in the Torah. Right? The Torah, the law of God. Maybe even better translated as the wisdom of God, the way of God. God's intention in even giving the law and the commandments in the Torah were to demonstrate to the rest of the world that was plagued by violence and injustice and harm to people that was anti-life in a lot of ways. He was wanting Israel to be a light to the nations, a light to show this is what it looks like to follow Yahweh, to follow the one true God. And so Moses is giving advice to this next generation who's about to enter into the promise and exhorting them and even maybe pleading with them, please choose life. And the way I picture it is maybe more, not so much as a 6'5", 300-pound man threatening us, but maybe more as a parent taking the hand of their child to cross the street, and teaching that child, don't run in the street because you could get hurt. Instead, choose life. Teaching the child the wisdom that grown-ups have that a child might not understand from their perspective. Choose life. Sometimes when we make decisions, there are consequences to those decisions, consequences to those actions. And I think that's what God is trying to warn against. In verse 19, he says, so that you and your children may live. He's pleading. He appeals to the children. I hear pleading, not an angry God, not a threatening God, but a life-giving God leading his children to freedom. The commands of God are made to give life. And yes, sometimes we, and maybe the people of Israel at the time, maybe we view those laws, view those commands like a bunch of college students who see rules as nothing but hindrances to fun. When in reality, the goal is life. And to help prevent those consequences to actions of an unjust world, an unjust society. And I think a lot of it has to do with even how we view God. Do we view God that way, as a 6'5", 300-pound threatening man? Or do we view him as a parent leading their child across the street? There's that saying, you never quit your job, right? You never quit your job, you quit your boss. You never quit your job, you quit your boss. Or at least the culture that your boss creates. And a lot of that depends on how you view your boss, right? Do you trust them? And if you don't trust them, or if you do trust them, you may be more inclined to want to follow their orders. Right? On the flip side, if you see them as a judgmental, angry, spiteful, power-hungry tyrant, then you may respond to their orders and rules a little differently. It's about our heart connection with our bosses or leaders, like it's about our heart connection with God. In verse 17, Moses even addresses it as a heart issue. But if your heart turns away, right? He's addressing this as a heart issue. God's goal in giving the law and teaching his children, his people, his goal is for our hearts to be transformed, heart change, so that what we want to do and what we should do become the same thing. Sometimes what we want to do and what we should do are two separate things. But what God wants to do is make what we want to do the same as what we ought to do. Right? That's the transformation, the goal. And to grow out of the immaturity of thinking that what is right is a hindrance to happiness, but to see instead that what is right is a pathway to joy. To begin to really live in a way or doing the right thing and living in faith, it's not about just avoiding consequences, but to have a heart change where you see life in what God is calling us to do. Not just sorry because we got caught, but sorry and repentant because we see it for what it really is, as not right and not life-giving, and something that hurts somebody that we love. God wants us to know in our core that it's about so much more. So, see the girl with the mask across the field? I end up chasing after them, right? Finding out Glenn, he's gone. He's like, I'm out. Smart guy. We discover later in life he's way smarter than the rest of us. But even then, I guess. But so I chase after them. I find out what happened. They tell me they squirted the couple. They're on the swings, and the guy got really upset and yelled. And so we end up trying to hide, right? Because 30 seconds later, no joke, like 30 seconds, maybe a minute later, we see the security vehicle of the campus fly around the corner, and with the lights blaring, right? And then all of a sudden we're in the nature trail trying to hide. And so we're in there hiding behind the bushes and everything. There's this giant spotlight that goes out onto where we are. And it felt like prison break. Like we're trying to get out. And so we're trying to hide. We're like, okay, we can't get caught with the evidence. So we take the water gun, we take the gorilla mask, and we put them in a ditch. And then we leave. And so our thought process is, maybe it was a dumb idea. Actually, it was a dumb idea. But we decided, okay, instead of going right back directly into campus, we'd have to pass the security vehicle and them. Let's go the other way and around. So we went out of the nature trail to the road, and this road would wind all the way around into the front of campus. So our plan was just to follow the road all the way around, the campus. And there was lots of trees, a lot of places to hide along the way. And it's dark, nobody's gonna see us, right? So we thought. So we ended up going the opposite direction, and so we're on, like on the side of the street. There's the guardrail, there's bushes, there's trees everywhere, and right along the road. Every time a car would come, we would hide. We're like, all right, let them go. All right, they pass. Okay, we're good. And then we hide again. Another car comes. We see the lights in the distance coming. Eventually, we got tired of that. We're like, whatever. Nobody's chasing us anymore. It's not really a big deal. Whatever. So we stopped hiding. And sure enough, we're walking, we let the next car. The very next car sees us, lights on, lights coming. Then some other lights came on. And we have to stop. Sure enough, it's the state stinking troopers. And they get out of the car, we're just standing there on the side of the road. They're like, hey, what are you guys doing out here? And we're like, oh, we're just walking around. And they're like, they look at us, they look us up and down, they're like, why are your shorts all wet with like grass stains and everything? You guys like wrestling around in the ground or something? And we're like, I don't know, nothing really. And then I'm like trying to be the mature one in the group, and I'm like, well, all right, here, this is what happened. We were just messing around, my friends here, they ended up squirting a couple, and we ran away. And then the cop said, oh, you're the ones. And then we're like, what? What do you mean the ones? What? You guys were called on this? And so they're like, yeah, we just got a call from your security that somebody's been assaulted. And we're like, this is not good. This is not good at all. And so we're there, they end up handcuffing us. They end up putting us on the guardrail. They take our IDs, they're checking our background. We're there sitting with handcuffs on the side of the road, cars going by, like, what did those guys do, And so we're there, and then Dave always gets nervous when he's like, when he gets nervous, he starts talking a lot. And so he's there, and he's like, okay guys, hey, if we all run in different directions, they can't catch all of us. And we're like, Dave, shut up, Dave. Choose life, Dave, choose life, stop. Go a different run. We're not doing that. They have our IDs, for crying out loud. So we end up sitting there, just being compliant and everything. We got caught. We got caught. And it was an interesting experience, being captured, being stuck, not being able to go anywhere. And, it was a nice time of reflection on us trying to escape the consequences of our actions. And in my mind, I'm like, I shouldn't be here. Like, I didn't do it. I'm not the one that pulled the trigger. But I'm the one that gave them the gun. I'm the one that gave them the super soaker. I'm the one that, suggested this. And so even though I'm not the one that pulled the trigger, I'm still responsible for what happened. And so I'm there in the same way that they are there. We hid, we got caught, we got frisked, and we were all responsible. I wonder how often we might think the same way in our world. How often do we see injustices happen in our world, in our society, and we don't feel the responsibility to say something or do something? That's not my problem. I'm not the one that actually did it. When in reality, we're the ones that contribute to the very same systems of injustice that are harming people. We want to escape our responsibility, saying, I'm not the one that pulled the trigger, but we're the ones that make a society like that possible. So by where we put our money, Maybe supporting a company that does unjust practices to their employees or to workers overseas and oppresses people in different ways. Maybe we vote for people based on our own interests without any regard for how our vote could contribute to hurting other people, people that we might be called to. There's sometimes that responsibility that we have that we aren't really always comfortable with, and we want to deny it. I think one of the biggest problems with our culture these days is the lie of complete individualism, where it's only about me. It's about myself and my needs, what I get out of it. And we forget about how we are all connected, how we are responsible for one another. I mean, coffee we drink, food we buy, the list can go on and on. And sometimes we might feel good about ourselves in what we preach and practice, right? We can say, well, I'm pro-life, right? And it's great to be pro-life. But are we really pro-life, or are we just pro-birth? To the point where the life after birth stops mattering because of how our society might hurt people in different economic spheres or different people groups that might not fit the ones who the society is really made for. Sometimes it feels like in some evangelical circles we feel really good about ourselves. But once you cut the umbilical cord, you're on your own. At least if you don't fit the profile of those whom we deem worthy. We want to deny that responsibility, but we can't help it. Why not supporting a mother? Why not helping families in deeper ways? And I'm not talking about just government, I'm talking about us as a church. Taking that extra step to be the presence that people may need. The responsibility that we have as God's people. Maybe subconsciously we might do these things without even realizing it because of the narratives that we tell ourselves as a society. And on top of that, not everybody gets treated as nice as we did by the police. Some of us may say, when we hear and are confronted by the reality of how maybe some other people were treated, oh, well, that's ridiculous. That's never happened to me. So obviously that can't be true. You're exaggerating. And we end up gaslighting or making them feel like they're wrong about their own experience rather than listening and seeing this as an issue that we need to speak up about. That never happened to me. Well, of course it never happened to you. That doesn't mean it didn't happen to somebody else. That doesn't mean we can't take their concerns seriously. And for many, and I know many people personally, many times this happens to them over and over again because of how they look like. Don't get me wrong. There are amazing, incredible police officers and people of the law that are angels, just incredible human beings who are doing good in their communities. And those people need to be celebrated and uplifted and supported in what they are doing. They are angels in their neighborhoods. And many of them even in this specific neighborhood around here. But then there are many others who have agendas that we need to be honest about and expose. An agenda that causes the systems to hurt some while not others. And when it hurts some, we are all connected because we are in this together. Now, obviously with all of this being said, we can't obviously be perfect in all of these things. Like, we can't possibly know where all of our money is going, when we buy something, or those whom we vote for, what they will ultimately do. But the point that I'm trying to make out of all of this is meant to highlight that we are responsible for each other. We are connected more than we may even realize. In Deuteronomy, in this passage, you see Moses, he's speaking to a group of people, right? However, in the Hebrew text, when he says, he doesn't use the plural form of you, right? He uses the singular form you. He doesn't use the plural form you, he uses the singular. Like as if he's talking to one person, even though he's talking to a group. You. God's people are meant to be one. That's why we take communion together. So what affects one of us affects all of us. We are in this together. I was the one who provided the water gun, even if I didn't pull the trigger. I may not be guilty, but I'm certainly responsible. I may not have been around when slavery and segregation and redlining were a thing, but my ancestors were, and I may not be guilty of what they did, but I certainly am responsible to listen, to hear, to do something now, to love my neighbor now, to give voice to the voiceless, to choose life, not only for myself, but for my neighbor, especially those who have been hurt the most by the structures that we put in place. Just as the law and wisdom of God in the Torah that Moses is talking about lays out for us to choose life. And also what Jesus lays out in the Gospels, choose life. Martin Luther King says, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. We are all connected. It's not just a me and Jesus faith. That's not a private faith. Our faith is only faith if lived out loud. And that faith can be lived out every single day in the decisions that we make on how we are obedient to his law of wisdom, love, and restorative justice. How we choose life, how we value our lives and value the lives of others who may be hurting. How are we living the wisdom of God so that we can represent another way of life, another kingdom, the rule and reign of God in our lives to the world around us that needs some hope? We have the power not only to be transformed, but to transform. So why do we act like we don't? We have more power than we realize. And as Uncle Ben says in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. Are we really choosing life by our outward actions? Are we fully finding and living in community together, holding each other up, holding each other accountable, and growing together in love? And if some of us are not free, are any of us? So, we're sitting there on the guardrail, handcuffed, trying to get Dave to shut up. And finally, the security guard comes with our two victims, right? And they come and confront us. And as soon as they see us, they look at me and they're like, "Chris, it was you?" And it's my friend Ashley, and then her boyfriend, who's the 6'5", 300-pound man that was yelling, "Dude, about your life." And so I'm like, okay, good. I have a friendship. And then they're like, "It was you?" And I'm like, "Well, not really, but yeah." Sort of. It was my water gun, but I'm sorry. I'm like, "You mad?" And so then the gun-ho security guard, he's like, "Do you guys want to push charges against these guys?" And they look at him like, "No, these are our friends." Because of our relationship, we had the charges dropped against us. Because of our relationship, the charges against us were dropped. And then later, so the cops had to take us back in the car. They had to take us to the school so that we could confront the resident director. And he's like, all right, well, we have to collect the evidence first. So we're still in handcuffs. We're in the back of the vehicle. You know, we're sitting there on our handcuffs. There's like a little gap and kind of like it dips. I don't know if anybody's been in a cop car, but some of them like dips, right? So you have that space for your handcuffed hands. So we're all sitting there in the back, and Dave, he keeps talking again. He's like, sorry guys, I'm nervous, and when I'm nervous, I start to talk a lot, and he says to the officer, he's like, hey, so you guys ever shooting anybody before? And the officer is like, not tonight. Not yet. And we're like, Dave, shut up, choose life, Dave, choose life, shut up. And so we get there, we finally pick up the evidence, we pick up the water gun, we pick up the gorilla mask, and the cop comes back in the car, and he's like, I gotta be honest, that gorilla mask is hilarious. And so we end up starting to joke with the officers, we're having a good time, we become friends. Eventually they're just like, yeah, this is ridiculous, I don't even know why we were called for this, but to this security guard, you guys are the worst thing since Charles Manson. So we're just gonna go through the motions, we're gonna make it seem like, we're really scolding you guys, but don't worry about it, this is dumb. And so we get confronted by the resident director, we're there, like lined up, and the cop is like, he's like, if you guys do this again, I'm gonna keep an eye out. We're like, we're sorry, all of that, and then we're free, we're liberated. But what got us liberated? It was that relationship. It was especially the relationship that we had with the ones who had the power to press charges against us. Where does that sound from? You guys can answer.
Yeah.
Who? There you go. Jesus. The Lord of life. That relationship. In verse 20 it says, this is the goal, right? Verse 20, he says, that you may love the Lord. That you may love the Lord. The Lord is your life, as it says. The Lord is your life. He wants you to live. He wants you to really live. And since Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob entered into a covenantal marriage-like relationship with God as his people, that continues with us through Christ today in a new covenantal relationship with God. Life is truly lived in relationship with Yahweh, God himself. He holds no charges against you when you are in relationship with him through Jesus Christ. And God's goal is found in you when you live into him. He is that so much more that he wants for us. He is the source of our hearts being changed and transformed so that we can want to do the things that we should do, where those two things become the same thing. And he gives that choice to us, that choice freely, that free will. Love comes with a choice, because we're not robots, right? And the thing is, just like he was patient with the people of Israel, he is faithful and patient with us in our walks, collectively and individually, with Christ. Paul says in Timothy, he says, even when we are faithless, he remains faithful because he cannot disown himself. That intimate relationship, loving him, it comes with a choice. And we are faced with those choices every single day. Jesus lays it out in his wisdom clearly when he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. So loving God is done through love of neighbor and obedience to God as the way that brings true life. So every choice you make to love or not love your neighbor, you have the chance to choose life. And sometimes that's hard. Sometimes that's uncomfortable. Sometimes it takes bravery and courage. But it's worth it. And that is really living, not just breathing. It's true life. Making that choice. Dietrich Bonhoeffer talks about this choice. He says, your yes to God requires your no to all injustice, to all evil, to all lies. Can we be that voice of yes to God in a world full of injustice, full of hurt, lifting up the broken, healing the wounded, bringing families to the orphans? and the widows, welcoming the immigrants, being obedient to the wisdom and justice of God's law of love. Loving him is where we find life. As John comes up to start playing before we take communion, I remember sitting back in that cop car, right? Well, on the guardrail in the cop car, being cuffed. And I remember basically sitting there, and it was interesting. It was an interesting feeling, right? It was an interesting feeling of being captive. Knowing that no matter what I did myself, I couldn't get out of this without someone else's help. No matter what brilliant plan Dave came up with, right? We were in this. And we needed someone else to advocate on our behalf. And I was blessed enough to have a relationship with the one who had the power to free me. How many of us might feel trapped, might feel cuffed, might feel helpless, might feel captive to the things in this life that keep us from really choosing life? Sometimes those habits that we have, those addictions that we might have, they might seem to feel like they control us so much and seem to control all of our choices and all of our decisions, and we feel handcuffed. Maybe our family situation, growing up, we feel like we are destined to live this way, rather than living into the freedom that God offers to break every chain, to truly be free, to break any curses, so that thousands of generations of blessings can follow. That's what we are empowered to live into if we choose life. So the hope is, the good news is, we have a liberator. We have one with whom we are in relationship with, who can set us free. We are blessed enough in relationship with the Son of God so that He who could very well hold charges against us decides to free us, who decides to make us whole. We just have to be willing. We just have to embrace the love that He has for us. And that's how we love Him. That's how we choose life. That's how we choose Him. By loving our neighbor as ourselves. Seeing the law of God as the wisdom of God, leading us by the hand across a dangerous street to live, forming and discovering a community that proves the love of God to the world by how we love each other, by how we value our lives and the lives of those who are poor in spirit, the lives of those who are meek, those who mourn, those who are persecuted for righteousness, for the peacemakers, for those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. That's our prayer. Love of God. That's our power. That's how we choose life. Choosing to live by loving Him for now and for eternity. Let's pray. As Jessica comes up.